Hi, my name's Daryl, and here's your Jeep news for June 12th. So on my first story today, this is all about the 5.7-liter Hemi engine returning to the Ram 1500. So if you don't know, Stellantis made the announcement last week that that 5.7-liter was returning. Basically, it's returning after kind of like a year off. Stellantis had retired that engine and they moved to the 3-liter straight 6 Hurricane engine. And some things happen. You know, we have a new administration in. Carlos Tavares, as CEO, he left. He was really moving towards electrification, and he really didn't want V8s anymore. But things have changed, and a lot of customers really wanted to see that 5.7-liter V8. They really wanted that option, and so Stellantis is bringing it back. And what I really wanted to focus on is if you are using your Ram 1500 for towing or for carrying a lot of cargo, you know, what is the differences between that 5.7-liter V8 and that Hurricane straight 6? And I think you're going to be kind of surprised that that 5.7-liter Hemi actually does really good. So let's go down. First of all, let's talk about the horsepower. So the 5.7-liter Hemi, it's got 395 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque, whereas the Hurricane engine, it's got 420 horsepower and 469 pound-feet of torque. Now, you know, there's a little bit of a difference there, quite a bit of difference in torque, but this is a twin turbo. So you're going to have a little bit of throttle delay and a lack of throttle response, especially at the low end. And when you're towing and you're trying to move a load, that's going to be pretty significant and you're going to feel it. Now, when you're, you know, probably towing up a hill, especially at elevation, you know, that extra horsepower and the extra torque of that Hurricane engine, you know, that's going to be appreciated. But what won't be appreciated is when you do tow with a turbo, you're going to notice that in fuel mileage for sure. So let's look at what are the differences in regards to towing capacity. So that 5.7-liter appropriately equipped with a specific trim is going to be able to tow 11,470 pounds and have a payload capacity of 1,750 pounds. So that's pretty darn good. Now, if you look at the Hurricane engine, I just did a quick search, it's going to be able to tow 11,550 pounds. So really, you know, only 80 pounds difference. Now, it's going to have an additional payload capacity of 1,980 pounds, so 230 pounds difference. And really, that's because of the fact that that Hurricane engine, you know, it's a little lighter weight than that big displacement 5.7-liter V8. So yeah, you're going to feel you're going to have a little bit of a difference in regards to payload capacity, but the towing ratings are relatively the same. Now, one of the things that has made that, you know, that Hemi 5.7-liter engine, it had been in the Ram 1500, you know, for almost 2 decades. And there's a reason why people love that engine, was it was really designed with a lot of low-end torque. And so if you look at the torque curve of that Hemi 5.7-liter V8, it has a lot of torque, all the way from 1,500 RPMs all the way up until about 4,800 RPMs. So it gets 90% of that 410 pound-feet of torque in that limited range, or in that actually very broad range. And so, you know, that's what's one thing really nice about that large displacement 5.7-liter V8 is that as soon as you touch the throttle, you're going to get immediate response. And that is so beneficial when you're towing, especially when you're just, you know, kind of taking off and, you know, you don't want to floor it, but you just want to move the load a little bit. You know, that 5.7-liter V8 does a great job. Whereas that Hurricane engine, because it's got those turbos, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a delay in the throttle response. And I love turbos in regards to towing at elevation, but certainly, you know, I don't like the throttle delay or the lack of throttle response sometimes on those turbos. Now, one of the YouTubers I've been watching quite a bit lately is this diesel mechanic from Getty's Garage. And he's pretty big. He's got 104K subscribers, and he really focuses on heavy-duty trucks, full-size trucks, and really talking about the comparison between the trucks. And one of the things that I really like about him is the way he tests. So he looks at he does some acceleration tests, but he also looks at, as you're going up a hill and as you're going up a mountain, what RPMs are you running at? So that gives you an idea on how hard that truck is working. And he also focuses a bit on gas mileage as well. And so I really like his content. So he did a comparison on kind of like the 1500 trucks, not the Ram 1500, but basically full-size trucks. And he did a comparison, and this was just like a month ago or so. And he did a comparison of his top kind of 12 engines in that segment. And if you notice, the Hurricane, both the standard output version and the high output version, are ranked 10th and 11th, whereas the kind of old tried and true 5.7 liter Hemi V8 on the Ram 1500 was actually ranked 4th. Now there is a couple of engines that are above that. He really likes the 5 liter V8 engine that's in the Ford F-150, as well as the 2.7 liter EcoBoost engine that's in that, as well as the Duramax diesel engine, which a lot of people really like. I haven't got the opportunity of driving that diesel engine. Supposedly it's really great. I'm just concerned with some of the emissions problems that are plaguing all diesel engines now. The other thing that I looked at is I looked at the fast lane truck folks, and I was looking at their video where they specifically compared the 5.7 liter V8 versus the 3 liter Hurricane. And the 3 liter Hurricane, it really did great in regards to the uphill testing versus the 5.7 liter V8, the Hemi engine. But the Hemi engine, it held its own in regards to that. But where the Hemi engine really shined was in the downhill performance and the number of brake applications. And so the number of brake applications as you were going down the hill that were required for the 3 liter Hurricane engine was 13. So it did a terrible job in regards to using engine braking in regards to slowing down the truck. Whereas the large displacement 5.7 liter Hemi engine, it only required 5. Now the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that Hurricane engine, even though it's not brand new, it's actually lived on the Wagoneer, I think, for maybe since 2022. So it has been around, but it has had a number of issues. So, I did a quick Google search to bring up the artificial intelligence, and I think you've all heard about the thermostat problems and overheating on that engine, as well as some issues with the catalytic converters also overheating. So there's been a number of issues with that Hurricane engine. Whereas you kind of know what you're going to get with that 5.7 liter V8. There are some issues with the 5.7, and we all know about them. There's been some lifter issues, but I think since those lifters were redesigned in 2016, I think the lifter issues have been less problematic, as well as the exhaust. But we still also have the exhaust manifold issue. So you'll hear a tick from that if that goes bad, and I don't believe they've addressed that issue yet. But at least you kind of know what you're getting with that Hemi 5.7, whereas with that Hurricane, you still have a whole lot of unknowns. So the other thing that you want to consider is the efficiency, the fuel mileage that you're going to get compared to these two engines. So Tim Kuniksis actually said, not in this particular article here, but he said that Hurricane engine is more powerful and more efficient. Well, maybe it's more efficient when it's not towing, but when you are towing, I can guarantee you it's not. So if you look at this screenshot right here, Getty's Garage, he did a fuel mileage comparison when towing between these different trucks. Now, this particular one, you can't really compare this mileage to this mileage down here because this is on a flatbed, whereas this is on a kind of a cargo trailer that has a lot of wind resistance. But you can compare like the 5.7 liter Hemi to the Chevy 5.5 liter. So if you look, it was 0.3 miles per gallon better than that Chevy 5.3 liter. And if you look at the class leading for these other tests was that 5.3 liter V8. So you can then compare that to the Hurricane. So we've got almost 1.1 miles per gallon better when towing kind of up a hill at grade. So you can kind of take that same information and say, well, obviously that Hemi 5.7 is going to fit somewhere over here. I would suspect, given that broad torque range and how well it does when it's flat towing, I would think you're probably going to see almost a 2 miles per gallon better on that 5.7 Hemi versus that Hurricane. And so that's something that you also might want to consider, is that you're going to get a lot better fuel efficiency when you're towing versus the Hurricane engine. Now, the only thing that I don't like about bringing back that Hemi is the fact that there is an upcharge. So there is a $1,200 upcharge from the standard output Hurricane to get that Hemi engine. And, I've got to believe that that Hemi engine is less costly to produce than that Hurricane engine. I can't guarantee that, but I would think that would be the case since that Hemi engine is really low. The one thing that you are getting, however, so if you get, and I guess orders are open now for that Hemi engine, but if you do purchase that, I guess it's going to be showing up in dealership lots this summer. You actually get like I think a $1,500 optional catback, a Mopar catback exhaust system. And so, it's going to roar even more than that kind of standard Hemi 5.7 liter exhaust sound. So you are getting, that catback exhaust system, which used to be an upcharge, or you actually used to have to buy a specific model in order to, or a certain trim in order to get that catback exhaust system, or, to make it available to you. So I guess that's good, but still, I think it would have made a lot more sense to have that 3.6 Pentastar be kind of like the base model, and then, one upcharge from that being the Hemi, and then an upcharge from that being the Hurricane. That's how I think they probably should have done it. But nevertheless, it's great that there's a lot of choice now being made available on that Ram 1500, but we're going to get even more here in the near future. So that's what I want to talk about next. So if you don't know, I'm a real fan on plug-in hybrids. I currently have a RAV4 Prime plug-in hybrid SUV, and I absolutely love it. But we want to get a brand new trailer, and it's going to be a lot heavier, and I've been waiting for a plug-in hybrid truck to show up. Well, so it turns out that the rebirth of the Hemi engine actually delayed the RamCharger. So the RamCharger is the Ram 1500 plug-in hybrid. It's basically has a V6 Pentastar engine in the engine bay, and it acts as a generator for the battery. So the Pentastar engine doesn't have any sort of connection to the drive wheels. All it does is run, and when the battery gets to a certain state, if it needs a charge, it spins that Pentastar engine up, and then it starts charging the battery. So very seamless. So you don't have any range anxiety. If you're on a long trip, you don't have to worry about, going to a charging station and charging up. All you got to do is go to a gas station and fill up just like you would normally would, and that Pentastar engine is going to keep that battery running. So, they had plans on having that RamCharger available here. It should have been available this summer. Well, it turns out that because of the fact that, they kind of looked at the market, a lot of people were complaining about the fact that the Hemi was gone. So they made a business decision to focus on the Hemi and bringing that back, and kind of put the, the RamCharger on the back burner. They're still working on it, but they really wanted to prioritize that Hemi, because they wanted to get back some of that market share. I actually think that was a mistake. I think Ram has the opportunity of getting ahead of everybody else. Right now they are ahead of everybody else, but everybody else is now looking at creating a range extending pickup truck. And so Ford is working on this, GM is working on this, and they could even had, probably a 6-month more of a head start over the other major brands. And so, I think they should have focused on that as opposed to focusing on bringing back the Hemi. But that's the business decision that they made. And I'm just going to have to live for it. I'm just going to have to be patient waiting for that to happen. But yeah, so if you look at what they said, when asked if the delay was instead the result of wanting to push attention driving Hemi V8 powered products to customers sooner rather than later, he didn't mince the words. He said, absolutely, said Kuniksis. No question, that was the case. And so, yeah, I'm pretty happy about that Hemi returning. Unhappy about my RamCharger being delayed, but that's just the way it goes. And in my last news story, let's talk about the Jeep Cherokee. So Cherokee is on its way back. It's going to be available probably a little bit later this year. It's going to be available only in a hybrid model. They've got some spy shots of it, and they've got some spy shots of the interior now. You can see that the new Cherokee has kind of went away from more of its kind of slopey design, and it's a lot more boxy now. So I think a lot of folks are going to be pretty excited about that. So here's kind of like the side profile of it. Here's the front profile of it. Kind of taking some of its cues from the new Wagoneer S. It's actually built on the same platform, so it's built on the Stella large platform, and they just got some interior shots. So Car and Driver was able to find some interior shots of it, and you can see that the interior looks really nice and clean. You can see the steering wheel, and you can see the multimedia display right there in the console. Looks also very much similar to the Wagoneer S. Now, as I mentioned before, it's going to be based on the hybrid platform. It's actually going to be based on a 1.6 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, and it's paired with something brand new. It's a 3-speed hybrid automatic transmission. So some of these automatic transmissions that are hybridized, they actually add quite a bit of horsepower to the engine, and so I'm assuming that that's going to be the case. They don't have any sort of horsepower or fuel mileage statistics available yet, but I'm thinking this is probably going to have somewhere in the range of 300 horsepower, and probably for fuel mileage is probably going to be, up around 30 miles per gallon. And so, yeah, it should be really exciting to have a really good looking Jeep Cherokee with increased performance and also increased fuel mileage. And it's still going to have, some of the guts of the 4-wheel drive Jeeps. So one of the entry levels into the, the Jeep off-roading community. So yeah, really excited about that. So this is Daryl with your Jeep news, and hope to see you in the next video very soon.